Let's learn about Wharton Lauder and its joint MA MBA and MA JD programs for people with global interests and how it is managing in our COVID-influenced travel-challenged world.
Welcome to Admission Straight Talk, the podcast dedicated to graduate admissions and helping you approach the application process thoughtfully and successfully. Your host is Accepted's founder and world-renowned admissions guru, Linda Abraham. At Accepted, our mission is to get you to that unforgettable moment when you read your acceptance email and shout, "Yes, I'm in!" Confident you'll be attending the perfect program to help you launch the career of your dreams.
Hello and welcome to the 465th episode of Admission Straight Talk. Thanks for joining me today and whenever you can tune in. The featured resource for today's show is Fitting In and Standing Out, the paradox at the heart of admissions. Your application needs to show that you're going to do both, and that's a difficult paradox at the heart of admissions. Master that paradox, and you are well on your way to acceptance. Download this free guide at accepted.com/FISO. Again, it's accepted.com/FISO. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Keenan Sweeney, Director of Admissions, Marketing, and Financial Aid at the Lauder Institute at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School and Penn Law School. Kara has an extensive background in graduate admissions, starting with her master's in higher ed administration at Columbia, and then moving on to admissions position at INSEAD, the University of Pennsylvania, Penn State, and now the Lauder Institute. Kara, welcome back to Admission Straight Talk.
Thanks, Linda. It's great to be with you.
I'm so pleased to have you once again. Now, can you give us an overview of the Wharton Lauder program for those listeners who aren't that familiar with it?
Sure. So the Lauder program was founded in the mid-1980s by the Lauder family to work with Wharton to really help to educate and generate a new, very globally minded group of business leaders. So students, when they come to the Lauder Institute, they're earning a Master of Arts in International Studies at the same time they're getting their MBA from Wharton. So basically it's an MA joint degree, fully integrated into the MBA program. And when students come to Lauder, they focus on one of our 6 programs of concentration. 5 of those programs are regionally focused. So we have a program on Africa, East and Southeast Asia, Europe, Latin America, and then what we call the SAMENA region, or South Asia, Middle East, and North Africa. So that's our 5th regional program. And then we also have a global program for our students who have already had fairly significant global experience. In our regional program, students are almost every case also focused on a language. So we have 10 languages of instruction at Lauder. When they come to Lauder, they're already speaking language at an advanced level, and then they'll continue to work on language until they get to the superior or the fluent level over the 2 years as part of their studies at Lauder. So fully integrated joint degree, MA, MBA, in tandem with Wharton. And we have a small program. We have about 70 to 80 students a year, really international community, very internationally experienced group of students, and just an amazing group to be a part of.
It's an amazing program. A couple of questions come to mind. Now, I know it's a much smaller part of the Lauder Institute, but are you also a joint program with the law school?
That's right. Yeah. So thanks for highlighting that. So we do have a joint degree with the law school as well. Each year we have a handful of students that do that. It's not really by design. It's a little bit by default. The law school only has, I think, just less than 200 students a year over at Penn Law. At Wharton, I think now they're up to about 900. So there's just a lot more MBA students.
Yeah.
And the Lauder program was founded to really work and fit in specifically with the Wharton School way back when it was founded. Our law school partnership is a little bit more recent, but this year our class that's starting this summer, we have 3 incoming JD students. We're really happy to have them in the program. So we welcome them. We love to have them, but we just tend to have fewer of them than MBA students.
All right. And the other question, you said it's 80 or 90 total. The Lauder Institute only works with applicants interested in the dual degree. There's no MA alone
on its own. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at Lauder, it's only a joint degree. So actually students take about 2 classes a semester at Lauder. So they take their normal Wharton course load or their normal course load over at Penn Law. At Lauder, we essentially kind of borrow the credits from the other degrees so that they can graduate with both. So some of the Lauder courses count towards the Wharton degree and vice versa. But no, we don't offer a standalone degree. It's only a joint degree program for students in one of the other graduate programs at Penn.
And if one goes for the dual degree program, you finish in the same 2 years as you would for the MBA, or the same 3 years as you would with the JD.
Exactly. So for Lauder, if you're doing the law school, you complete your first year of law school totally at Penn Law, independently of Lauder. And then your second and third year would be as part of the Lauder program. And at Wharton, you actually start Lauder first. So we have a summer term that preempts the Wharton program. And then you start the Wharton program in August each year. And then you graduate on time with the rest of your Wharton class 2 years later.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever tried to do an MBA JD with the Lauder program?
So I think it's a little bit hard. So actually, if you do the MBA program, with the coursework, the requirements, and then also there's really a cap on the number of classes you can take. So you can do a joint degree, but I think triple is hard. We actually have an alum who I think did the MBA and Lauder simultaneously. And then later on, after that was done, he actually went to law school and did 3 years of a JD program. So I think we have one person out of category, but I think it's almost impossible to do all three at once.
Probably, yeah.
But we definitely have some students who are interested in both. The other partnership that you can do with Wharton is the healthcare management program. And we actually get the question a lot from applicants. Can I do Lauder and the healthcare program? And you can't do both at the same time. However, you can do Wharton Lauder and then take a lot of the healthcare courses.
Sure.
So for anyone who's interested in international healthcare, whatever the case may be, you can do Wharton and Lauder and still take a lot of the healthcare coursework and programming.
Okay. Now, we last spoke in fall 2019, just as the coronavirus was starting to intrude on the world's consciousness.
Right.
Okay, we were hearing about it over there. It wasn't yet here.
Right.
How has Wharton Lauder, a program that reveled in travel, adapted and adjusted its plans for something even more so than looking back? I'd like to look forward.
Yeah.
A little bit looking back, but mostly looking forward. How about that?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So just like the rest of the world, we were particularly affected, I think, a lot in terms of graduate programming, because as you mentioned, so much of our programming is focused on the ground immersions for our students. All of our students historically have done a summer immersion as well as other immersions over the 2 years of the program. So March 2020, we put a halt to all travel, not just at Lauder, but throughout the university. But we were really thankful that we still had actually our two largest classes came through over those 2 years of COVID. We have 80 students in each of our current classes. Last summer, we were able to actually have the students come to Philadelphia and do sort of a Philadelphia immersion, which, considering most of our students are not from Philadelphia, a lot of our students are from outside of the US, actually being able to come to campus. The classes were virtual, but we did have a lot of sort of Philly cultural experiences for our students. They were able to take tours. They explored some of the different ethnic neighborhoods in Philly. So there was a lot that they could do in Philadelphia. And then last year, of course, pretty much, I think all of our students, not just at Penn, but in most graduate schools, were taking their classes virtually. But there were opportunities for students to meet outdoors. And essentially, we really moved, I think, seamlessly most of our programming online. I think our students were still able to build culture, build community. Of course, the language classes, a lot of those things still took place. But the great news is that as of last August, our students were actually able to start traveling again. So we had about a year-long pause on travel, which of course was not just us, not just Penn, but everyone really, so it was inevitable that we would have to follow suit as well. But last August, we had our first intercultural venture took place again, and that they started up again, I should say. And the students actually went to Alaska to study Indigenous communities, which was great. And then a little later in the fall, in October, we had a group of students go to Iceland to study gender equity and women and entrepreneurship. So we were able, I think, one of the first groups at Penn and certainly at Wharton and Lauder to start traveling again. So our students have been doing smaller immersions, week-long immersions, and actually right now, over spring break, all of our students are traveling there. And I think we have about 4 locations around the world: Senegal, Israel, Poland, Hungary. That's part of one trip. And then they're actually in India is the last location. So we're kind of fully ramped up. We've also had students traveling and doing research as part of their master's thesis project, the Global Knowledge Lab. And we're planning on our summer immersion taking place in region this coming summer of 2022 as well. So things are, I would say, fairly robustly returning to normal for Lauder. Maybe not fully the way they looked pre-COVID, but quite similar to the way they were in the past.
All right. Now you mentioned a trip to Hungary and Poland. They obviously have almost a front row seat, maybe more of a mezzanine seat on the crisis, the invasion and the war in Ukraine. How is the crisis in Ukraine, or the war in Ukraine, I should call it, affecting travel? And how do you anticipate affecting the program? Now, it's obviously very hard to say because the situation is so fluid.
Yeah. So I think all of us were, cautious about the students traveling to Poland and Hungary during this time. They're in safe locations. Initially, with the world and how volatile it is right now, we were concerned about COVID protocols. Of course, the students have to test and do everything they would have to do as part of country requirements that they're going to. So that was our focus pretty much leading up to the trip. Then, of course, the terrible situation with Ukraine. So our students still did go. And in fact, they're blogging about their experience, which will be part of some of the social media posts that we have over the next couple of weeks about their experience going to these countries during this time. But right now, we're trying to maintain as much normalcy, I think, as we can for our students. There have been, certainly not just at Lauder, but at Penn, different ways for our students to seek out support if they feel like they need to do that as part of what's going on. Of course, we have students coming from that part of the world or have family origins in that part of the world. And really everyone's affected, at this point, whether it's directly or indirectly. So making sure we're there for our students in sort of an emotional support way, also making sure we educate our students. The last couple of weeks, I can't tell you the number of talks, sections, lunchtime talks that there have been at Lauder and throughout the university on the situation so our students can understand it better. We have alumni hosting events as well. So I think a strong focus on that region, but also I think a strong desire to have things be, as normal as possible for our students now, and of course, going into the summer as well.
It's interesting that it's Poland and Hungary. It just so happens my mother is Polish, my father was Hungarian.
Oh, really?
His hometown, which he never visited after leaving it, is now a part of Ukraine.
Wow.
The very western end of today's Ukraine, but that's just a footnote to our conversation.
Of course. So you're a perfect example of having family origins, in that region, which so many Americans do, and our students as well.
Right. Yeah. Now let's turn to the application process. How do you go through an application?
Yeah. So the great thing with Lauder is you can actually apply simultaneously with your application to Wharton. So you complete the Wharton application online, your Wharton essays, letters of recommendation, standardized test score, everything is the same on the Wharton side of the application. And then within the Wharton application, you indicate that you're also interested in applying to Lauder. So it's a supplemental application built into the Wharton application online. For Lauder, we asked for a couple of specific things. So we asked for the results of your language score. So all of our students who apply to Lauder have to take something called the Oral Proficiency Interview, or OPI. It's administered by a third-party company called the Language Testing Institute. So for anyone who's listening, you can find out all of that information on our website under admissions and language testing. It's actually quite a good resource. There are audio clips of language tests that have taken place in the past. So for applicants who are curious, hey, what is a conversation in Spanish or Chinese going to be like as part of the OPI? You can take a listen to some of the examples, and it also has some other helpful information on preparing for the OPI. So our students take the OPI. It's a 30-minute phone conversation in language. In order to be admitted to Lauder, students have to test at least at the advanced low level or above. In order to be admitted to the program in one of our 10 languages that we teach at Lauder, if they're interested in studying language at the Institute. If they're interested in applying to our global or our Africa general track, they have to test at the superior level in any language other than English. So essentially that means being fully bilingual. It can be in their native language, provided it's not English. So really that's essentially for anybody who's a non-native English speaker who also, of course, is fluent in English. The global program is designed for students that have had fairly significant international experience already and are looking for more of a macro level of experience, studying global studies from sort of that wider lens, looking at issues across region, that sort of thing. Our Africa General track is also for students who are fluent in any language other than English and are interested in focusing on the entire continent of Africa. Historically, we had called it the Anglophone Africa track, but that was kind of a misnomer because our students were really studying the entire continent, not just English-speaking Africa. We also have an Africa Francophone track. So of course, that's for students who can test at the advanced level in French. And then again, with our 10 other language programs, which are regionally focused, part of our regional programs of concentration. So the language component is important as part of the application, as well as over the duration of the 2 years in the program.
So, So does every Lauder participant know at least 2 languages? Or
well,
that
I would
not,
say every Lauder applicant has advanced knowledge of a language in addition to English. So English is, of course, the language of instruction at Wharton and a lot of classes at Lauder. And then you also have to be either fluent or advanced in any language other than English, or, one of our 10 languages that we teach at Lauder. Yeah.
Okay. And what are the 10 languages? I'm just curious.
So maybe just to break it down by program of concentration is probably more helpful. Yeah. So for Africa, as I mentioned, we have the French track, the Francophone track. For our Europe program, we offer Spanish, Russian, French, and German. So we have 4 languages for students in our European program of concentration. For Latin America, we offer Spanish or Portuguese. In East and Southeast Asia, we have Mandarin, Chinese, Japanese, or Korean. And then our last program of concentration, regional program, is the Samina track, and we offer Arabic or Hindi. So those are the 10 total languages that students, so when you're applying to the program, essentially you're taking an OPI in one of those 10 languages if you plan to pursue regional studies with language, or you're taking the OPI in any language other than English for our Africa General or Global program.
What if let's say, are interested in European business and you speak, I don't know, Italian or Romanian?
Yeah. So we only have 10 languages right now. We are always adding more. A few years ago, we added Korean. We have seen interest actually from some of our applicants and perhaps Vietnamese track. We're getting a lot more interest with students in that language profile. So not to say that we won't add languages, but right now those are our 10 languages. If you're interested, like if you come to Lauder and you're focused on the global program, you're already fluent in Italian, for example, you have the opportunity through the School of Arts and Sciences maybe to take advanced language in some of the classes that Lauder doesn't, or languages that Lauder does not teach. But pretty much we have a formula for Lauder. It's kind of those regional programs with one of those 10 languages, or the Africa or general Africa track, or global track, I should say.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. The other components of the application are, we have 2 essays for Lauder. So we have our first essay asks you to talk a little bit about why you're interested in Lauder, why you're applying to your chosen program of concentration. And then our second essay is actually new for this year. We ask students to talk about, or applicants to talk about, what they might like to research as part of the master's thesis project at Lauder. And for those who are listening who are unfamiliar with that, it's called the Global Knowledge Lab. Definitely another opportunity to go to our website, read about the GKL, as we call it, to learn a little bit more about the project. But basically, it's a master's thesis project. Students can write about almost virtually anything that they're interested in doing, so long as it relates to their program of concentration. We've had students write about things coming from the arts and entertainment perspective, from the sports world. We've had students write about blockchain, finance, history. So some of our students have actually leveraged the GKL to transition to maybe a job after doing Lauder. So we had a student a few years back who wrote about the MBA in China and was able to, through the contacts and things like that he made, take a job with the National Hockey League in New York. So he was really able to leverage that research. We've had other students work on just passion projects. A few years ago, we had a student who was really interested in the history of North Africa, so wrote about that, even though that's not his personal background. So it's just an opportunity for our students to do master's research as part of the MA degree. It's definitely different from what you would do at the MBA program. And they'll actually do on-the-ground research as well, field research. And the second component of the GKL project is a group project. So when students are approaching the application, they don't need to know fully what they would like to research. They're not committed to it, but we want them to understand that the master's thesis project is a big part of Lauder. You'll have a ton of support as you do this project over 2 years, but we want you to be thinking about what you might like to research. Show us that you've gone to the website, you've read a little bit about what the GKL is. So you're coming, fully educated on what the project is, and that it's a requirement of Lauder while you're putting together your application.
You mentioned that these questions are new for this year, particularly the second one. I guess the first one might have changed a little bit from previous years, but it's been pretty similar. Do you plan to keep the questions for next year, or do you know yet?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we're not totally done this admission cycle. I think it'll definitely, we might sort of revert to having one question that encompasses 2 parts, because I think for our applicants, sometimes, of course at Wharton, there are 2 required essays as well, not huge essays. I think they're about 400 words each. Same for Lauder, just about the same. But we realize that 4 essays when you're applying to a program, and presumably we're not the only program you're applying to, we want to be mindful of the applicants or how much time and all that sort of thing that they're devoting to it. So I think that knowing why you're applying to Lauder, your chosen program of concentration, and knowing what you might like to research as part of the GKL will still be part of the essay questions in some form. Whether they're duplicative of what we have this year, perhaps not, but I think you can, think about that as part of your applications down the line, that they will, both be a part of that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now you were still discussing, how do you approach the application?
Yeah,
right?
application requirements.
Process.
So OPI, essays, those are really the two big things. We'll ask you to tell us a little bit about any international experience that you've had. So for us, we sort of look at that as 3 months or more outside of your home country. To make your application, it is a joint application to both programs. So I emphasize that because your application is not reviewed independently by two admissions committees. It's reviewed jointly. And actually the Lauder Admissions Committee takes the lead with the review of your application overall. So myself, my colleague, our second year students who are trained to read applications, we will read your Wharton Lauder application from start to finish. And we're actually trained to evaluate your Wharton application as well. So we'll read your Wharton essays, all of that in tandem with your Lauder application. The good thing about that is you're only evaluated in the pool for the Wharton Lauder pool. So with Wharton and Lauder, it's a highly self-selected group of applicants who have applied to the programs. They know the language requirement, they've had some international experience, they want to do 2 degrees. So often people will be concerned that they're disadvantaging themselves by applying to Lauder, but really it's kind of the inverse. You're actually only applying amongst a much smaller pool of really highly qualified applicants versus like the 5, 6, or even like 7,000 or whatever it is that Wharton gets. We do make a joint decision with Wharton. So we'll meet as part of a joint admissions committee so that you're jointly offered admission to both programs, but Lauder does kind of take the lead with that application review. The last component for the Lauder application is actually after you've submitted. For Lauder, there is a dedicated interview in addition to the Wharton team-based discussion. So you'll do the normal Wharton application interview process, all of that. And then at Lauder, you'll have about a 30-minute interview with a current student or an alum or a staff member, specifically focused on your interest at the Lauder program.
Okay, great. Well, that was a fantastic overview. All right, so a few questions on this. What gets you excited in a positive way about an application to Lauder?
Yeah, so I think for our applicants, most of them are coming with, I wouldn't not necessarily tons of international experience, but we do see that most of our students have had some international exposure. So it's sort of a given that they'll have that. But I think what excites me about an application is when they can sort of tie that in to the program, to their interest at Lauder, to their long-term goals. So kind of seeing how it's relevant, not just to something really interesting on their resume or interesting on their CV, but something that really is telling about what they'll bring to the classroom. So maybe you spent 2 years working in Egypt after you graduated from college. That's great. Maybe you were working, let's say you were doing consulting, amazing. But what did you learn that were sort of like the intangibles that you can bring to the classroom, to the class discussion? And really, I think what we're looking for at Lauder is evidence of kind of that cultural mindset, that global mindset that you don't always necessarily have, I think, as perhaps somebody who spends time outside of your own country. You can seek that out, or you can kind of live in that bubble that I think some people tend to do when maybe they travel or work abroad. It's important, I think, for our applicants to show evidence to the admissions committee that they're really culturally curious about the world. They see the value of culture and language, and travel is an amazing experience. But I think learning from that and what you can bring back to the classroom, maybe then take to your profession, you have those kind of intangible skills. I think that's really important. So bringing that to your essays, bringing that to your interview discussion, I think is really important to show us that you have kind of the soft skills as well, in addition to that maybe on the ground experience outside of your home country.
Sounds like the ability to extract lessons, if you want. Lessons is probably too strong a word, but to learn from the multicultural experiences that you've had.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. What is the wrong way to approach these questions?
It's something so simple, but we do see it, I think, every year, is folks who have not done their research, who it's such a simple thing to do, is to spend your time reviewing the website, listening to a podcast, reviewing a webinar or video, really learn about the program. So when you're approaching the essays, you're telling us, specifically why you're interested in the program, specific classes or faculty members, or the opportunity, what you really would like to research, showing that you've done your research on what the GKL project is. We have students or applicants who will write essays about how much they love to travel and how they've traveled to so many countries. And that's great. I love to travel too. but you really want to make it a substantive argument about why a Master of Arts, full degree program makes sense for you as part of your MBA studies, how you see that adding value to your student experience as a business school student, how you see it adding value to your career goals, and showing us that you really understand what Lauder is. I think some people just see Master of Arts International Studies, okay, you get to travel, but really showing us you understand the different components of the program is really important.
All right. Now, what about the applicant who is multilingual, has international experience, the kind that you're looking for, and global career goals, and he or she can make that great argument for why Wharton Lauder is perfect for them, but their undergraduate GPA is not something they're terribly proud of, or their test score isn't what they were hoping for.
Right.
Are they doomed? What can they do, if anything, to improve the likelihood of acceptance with one or two even below average stats? Or is two below average stats just too much to overcome?
So I don't think hopefully no one is ever doomed at the onset, when
Okay.
they apply to the program. Yeah. The great thing about Wharton, I think when we're taught on how to review Wharton applications in particular, and we're trained on that in a formal way, is really to look at the application from a read to admit perspective. So my colleague
I remember Blair
Mannix
was on once, and she was not that long ago, and she was emphasizing that. We'll link to her interview also.
Yeah. So I think that's an amazing way to approach the application review from the standpoint of an admissions reader and also from the standpoint of an applicant. So definitely we're looking at what is amazing about this applicant. We are not looking for reasons to ding an applicant. We're looking for reasons to admit them. So, I've gotten this question a ton, throughout my career from applicants. And I think, nothing ever boils down to a GMAT or GRE score or a GPA. I think you need to think about your application and showing evidence to the committee that really what we're looking for when we talk about GPA or standardized test scores is that you can handle the rigor of the program. And on the Wharton side, obviously the first term is very heavily quantitative. So can you handle the quantitative rigor? Have you taken calculus? Do you have some preparatory work that's going to help you handle that? And then on the Lauder side, have you written a research paper or have you taken some arts and sciences stuff? So we're going to look for those things for sure. Having said that, we absolutely have students in the programs who are below the average in terms of their standardized test scores or with a GPA, that maybe they're not crazy about. I think two things or even maybe three things applicants can do is definitely utilizing the optional essay as part of the Wharton part of the application. Don't just tell us you have a 2.5, GPA and, a 550 GMAT and not give us any context, so let us know, were you working, full time while you were going to college? Maybe you were an undergraduate focused major on, in history, but you've taken coursework post-bac that, you took accounting or some other, stats or other quantitative courses that would help you prepare for an MBA. That's a great thing to do, by the way. If you don't have a strong math background or you didn't take math classes as an undergraduate, go online and take a couple of classes focused on quantitative work so you can brush up on that skill set. Did you only take GMAT or GRE once? If you only took it once and you didn't do great, well, it kind of makes sense to do it again, right? See if you can improve on your score. So give us some color there if you're at all concerned about it. The other thing is most of our applicants, I would say it's fair that they have some quantitative aspect to their job. So highlighting that, maybe you're not a great test taker, but maybe you're running numbers all day at work and you're doing really well. Well, then have your recommenders highlight that, in their recommendations, say, hey, this person is amazing in these quantitative capacities. So think about other ways in your application in which you can bring in those strengths that you think might look a little negative in one part of your application, how you can offset that in other parts of your application overall. So through your essays, recommendations, the optional essay, and then of course, perhaps taking some preparatory work, pre-MBA coursework to show us, hey, actually, I can do this work. Or maybe I know it's a little bit of a, weakness in my application, and this is what I'm doing to show you I can handle it. So definitely not doomed, but think, really through strategically about approaching the application so you can be successful.
All right. I'm also going to mention to readers that just a couple of weeks ago, I did a show on getting accepted to graduate school with a low undergraduate GPA. And if you're interested, it's accepted.com/458. So you can check it out there. It basically incorporates a lot of what Kara has said in terms of both providing context for whatever went wrong in your undergraduate record, and then showing that today those are no longer a factor for you and you really can handle the work. Showing that you can handle the work is just foundational. And that's the purpose really of the GPA and the test score in the
Exactly.
application process. All right, let's get back to Wharton Lauder though. Thank you for your response. It was a great response. And I also loved when, both from you and from Blair when she was on that the review to admit kind of perspective on application reviews and evaluations. Now, you mentioned before that if that the Wharton Lauder applicant pool is much smaller than the Wharton applicant pool overall, and that you can't be disadvantaged by applying to that program. But is it possible? I mean, if you review an application and you say, this person would be great at Wharton, but I don't think Wharton Lauder is right. What is that person then dinged, or do you refer them to the regular MBA admissions?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked that because we do get that question a lot as well. So actually on the application, when applicants are working on the application, they can literally check a box that says, if I'm not admitted to Lauder, would I still like to be considered for the Wharton only program? So be sure to check that box if you're still interested in Wharton. In reviewing the application, we actually have the ability to do exactly what you're saying. This person for X, Y, and Z reason isn't maybe a fit for Lauder, but would be great for Wharton. So that's kind of the second place. And then thirdly, in the actual admissions committee, when we're going through every applicant, we'll maybe talk about, hey, this person really doesn't have the international exposure. It's usually that, I would say, frankly, or we do have sometimes people who apply before they have their language score. They get their language score, and no matter how hard they work on it, they're not able to get to our minimum score of advanced low. So then in that case, we can't admit them for Lauder, but they can still certainly be admitted for Wharton. So each year there are a handful of students who are admitted for Wharton only. But I would say if you're a good fit for Lauder and you've got a great Wharton application, there's really no reason why you wouldn't be, unless it's something really glaring like the language score or something like that. But yes, you absolutely will still be considered for Wharton only if for some reason Lauder isn't a fit.
Okay, great. Thank you. What is the Lauder interview like? You said it's a little bit separate from the TDD.
Yeah, exactly. So probably a little bit more used to what our applicants might be thinking about your kind of typical MBA interview, but 30-minute conversation. Of course, now we've been doing them over Zoom for the last couple of years. Historically, we had done them on campus or really all over the world for Lauder based on where our applicants are living. So if you're in Tokyo or London or Sao Paulo, we have alums, in all of these places. So in that case, we would utilize our alumni. Right now we're doing them on Zoom. We'll see if that continues. So yeah, for Lauder, it's really a couple of things. Why not? Most important thing for us is why not just Wharton on its own? Why Lauder? What's key about the Lauder program that you won't get through Wharton on its own? Because of course at Wharton you can travel. There are sort of mini immersions that you can do, things like that. But through Lauder, what are you really looking to gain? Why does the program make sense for you? We'll ask about short and long-term goals. We'll ask about your language skills, why you want to study a language if that's a part of the program for you, what you'd like to research. We'll ask for that evidence of kind of that cross-cultural mindset. Ask you maybe give some examples of times where you were dealing with maybe a cultural barrier that you had to navigate. So, pretty typical, straightforward questions. I don't think anything that would be too shocking, but definitely good for our applicants to prepare for that. Similar as you would to a job interview. I always tell people you want to come prepared, bring your resume, be prepared to talk about your strengths, about your gaps, about your goals. So pretty straightforward.
Where do Lauder grads get jobs?
Yeah, so we have kind of the usual suspects to some extent in terms of post-MBA outcomes for Lauder students, with a caveat that a lot of our students are doing that work maybe for Amazon or McKinsey or in finance internationally. So we have quite a lot of international students at Lauder who are maybe looking to stay in the US for a couple of years, gain some more US experience. So going to New York or to the West Coast, Chicago, wherever the case may be. And then of course we have students, whether they're from the US or not, looking to work in region. I would say students come to Lauder for a couple of reasons. Some of them really going to work the 2 years because they want to do, private equity in China or private equity in Nigeria. And that is totally a focus for them. So they work on their language, they work on all of these things to have that as a job. For some of our other students, it's private equity anywhere. It doesn't matter, so maybe the industry or the role is the primary driver and location is second or third, But our typical outcomes are technology. Amazon is the #1 hire for Wharton and Lauder for the last couple of years. Not by a huge number, but definitely #1. After that, it's consulting, financial services, but we are seeing an increasing number of students go into social impact, into NGOs, into some development work. And then, of course, each year we see more and more students, both at Wharton and Lauder, interested in entrepreneurship. So that, I would say those are kind of the 5 areas that jump out. But again, fairly similar to MBA, but we see about 1 out of every 3 Lauder students working outside of their home country after graduation. And of course, with a lot of the international students wanting to stay in the US for a few years.
Right, right. Now, we recently asked listeners what they would like to ask admissions directors. Here are 2 questions from the same listener, an international applicant, but I feel they're particularly relevant for a program with such international reach. So I'm going to pose them now. And one of them, I'm not sure is all that relevant to Wharton specifically, but we'll go there anyway. Okay. So the question is, why are most compulsory admission essay prompts so personal?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right. And then the person adds, on a personal note, I cried trying to unearth memories I had buried so deeply so I could write truthfully. Yes, it was a worthwhile experience and reconciliation with the past for me, but it made me feel very vulnerable. Is vulnerability in an essay, whether perceived, real, or imagined, a good element? That's the first question.
Yeah. So, I don't know about the vulnerability in particular, but I would say it's, of course, when you're writing your essays, and I think not just for Wharton or Lauder, for any business school, you want to draw from your personal experiences. Right. And I think business schools are looking to bring in students, of course, that have had interesting professional experiences and have a strong aptitude for whatever they're looking to do afterwards, but they're also looking to bring in good community members. And I know that's a big focus for Wharton in particular. So bringing, you don't have to tell us a sob story about your upbringing, and the funny thing is I do feel, and maybe I'm showing my age, but I do feel like applicants now, we're seeing more and more personal stories come to light, whether they think that's what we want to read or not. I don't know. I feel, some of our applicants now generationally, they're just more maybe attuned to talking about themselves on a personal level, the way I feel years back, you wouldn't necessarily have seen, people keeping it very professional. So I think it's good to have a combination, it's not, a therapy session. I don't think you need to, go to the heart of something that you would find upsetting for you to talk about. I think you want to write about something, let's say, for example, for Wharton's second question, talking about community, something that's really personal and important to you, but also something that has practical application to the community at Wharton, perhaps to also in some ways your professional experience, your background, your goals. So think of it in a practical or strategic way. I don't think you need to get so personal with us that it leaves you feeling uncomfortable. I think you want to feel like you wrote a good essay that shows part of your character and how you can bring that good character, that strong character to the graduate program. For Lauder, I think our essays are a bit more sort of directive in terms of your academic experiences. But of course, when we're bringing individuals to our programs. And again, as I said, you want to make sure they're good community members, which is so important, for the student themselves, for the classmates. And so I think some of those essays are looking to find that you're going to be a good contributor.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Now, the second question from the same individual. How do you consider international students who apply to universities and cannot pay at least 5 to 10% of the fees? Do you get irritated and wonder if they consider the university a charity home?
No, definitely not. So, we have a ton of international students, not just, of course, at Lauder. We have students coming from all over the world, of course, where there's huge, disparate salaries, where the average salary might be $15,000 or $20,000 a year versus, whatever it is in the US or, in this part of the world. So, of course, but we do expect that students have done their research. And frankly, I don't know of a ton of students receiving 100% full funding to both programs. At Lauder, we're very lucky to be incredibly generously funded by the Lauder family. So actually for Lauder, most of our students are receiving the average award for fellowships is $40,000. And the cost of the program is like maybe $45 to $50 each year, depending on some of the travel components. So most of the Lauder students are actually receiving full or near to full funding for the Lauder program. On the Wharton side, you have to approach it as if you're applying to an elite business school, it's a huge investment, right? Financial investment. It's also an investment in yourself. And I think, kind of the studies that the programs have done, the other MBA programs as well, that within 5 years or something, the return on investment is really, worthwhile. So you have to think about the financials of, do you want to take out a loan? The reality of getting a full 100% scholarship to a top MBA program, maybe you'll be lucky enough to do that. The average student isn't, getting full funding. But, when we're reading your application, we're not thinking about that at all. We're looking at the quality of your application. In terms of financing funding, that comes after you've been admitted to the program. So for Lauder, every student who comes to Lauder is admitted to the program and receives at least a merit-based award. And then you have the opportunity at Lauder to apply for need-based funding on top of that. At Wharton, they have generous funding, but again, not everybody is getting a full scholarship. So you have to come into it knowing that, realistically, you're probably going to have to fund part of the program through loans or through your own financing.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think I should very much reassure our listener. What would you have liked me to ask you?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I think, you talked a little bit, you asked me a little bit about what makes me excited in reading an application. I think, if I could, maybe one question is like, what's our ideal student? I don't, it's sort of unfair to say there is such a thing as an ideal student. I think it's something that maybe is probably more practical is what makes a successful student in the program. What do we see from the application stage, which then makes them successful? And I think in talking about the community aspect or being a good community member, I think that's more and more important as the years go by, especially I think with what COVID taught us, that you're going to have unprecedented challenges all the time. And COVID, of course, is this huge world crisis that kind of threw us all for a loop. And hopefully we don't experience something else like that in our lifetime. But for our students, once they're, when they're in the program and long term, they're always going to have challenges that are thrown their way, whether they're big or small. So I think coming to a place like Wharton and Lauder, knowing that it's rigorous, you're going to be very busy, you're going to have a ton of demands, but still making an effort to be a good community member, to be a collegial, to be kind, to kind of have these untangibles that I think we don't necessarily look for as much, and maybe that necessarily come through as much in an MBA application, I think are really important and continue to be even more important to show kindness, patience, understanding. Of course, with COVID in the US, we had a big societal upheaval with Black Lives Matter and other, sort of social crises, political change in the country. And I think everyone is feeling in general, worn out from the last couple of years. So I think having that, knowing that experience has been really difficult for everyone, whether you're a student, a staff member at a university, a professor, and coming to the program and coming with the mindset of being a good community member, somebody who's going to make a good contribution, be positive, patient, be kind. I think those are the things that I personally am looking for to see in applicants, in addition to, of course, having strong academic and professional background, kind of having some of those personal skills, or personal qualities that I think can set you apart, especially in today's world where everything is so challenging.
Right. I really want to thank you for adding that. It goes back to the concept of community that has come up several times in our conversation today. So that was a great note upon which to end. And I really want to thank you for joining me today, Kara. Where can listeners and potential applicants learn more about the Wharton Institute's joint MA, MBA, and MA-JD programs?
Yeah, so you can learn definitely more about Lauder by going to our website, which is lauder.wharton.upenn.edu.
Okay,
or you can
we'll link to that.
Yeah, you can just Google the Lauder Institute, and hopefully you'll find us that way as well.
All right, great. Thank you again, Kara. And listener, thank you too for joining Kara, Keenan Sweeney, and me for our 465th episode. If you find the show worthwhile, I have a suggestion for you. Subscribe to Admissions Straight Talk. That way you won't miss any future shows. A quick reminder, master the paradox at the heart of graduate admissions by downloading our free guide, Fitting In and Standing Out, the paradox at the heart of admissions. Grab your copy at exhibit.com/FISO for Fitting In, Standing Out. Again, that's exhibit.com/FISO. Thanks again for coming. This is Admissions Straight Talk produced by Accepted, and I'm your host, Linda Abraham. I'll talk to you again next week.